Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first ever live show of Autism in Action. I'm your host, Kirby McIntosh, and I want to begin by thanking the fine folks here at the Disability Channel for everything that they do on behalf of and for people with disabilities. On this show, we're going to focus on two key topics, autism and advocacy, and I just want to let the viewers know we are live on Facebook, so give us your comments and feedback. We are also broadcasting on Roku TV and on Comcast in the United States. So we have a great show for you today, and I'm excited to get started. But before we do, I want to take a few minutes just to talk to you a little bit about the history of the Autism Coalition and loop you in especially about some of our new initiatives on the issue of education. While some of you might be familiar with the Autism Doesn't End at 5 campaign last year, a lot of people may not fully be aware of how far back that fight goes. The campaign, fought by a variety of individuals, and I want to make that clear, it wasn't just the OAC, but it was a fight this year to convince the Liberals to reverse a policy of cutting off autism treatment for children on the spectrum over the age of 5. We held multiple rallies, there was extensive media coverage of the issue, there were petitions, a letter writing campaign. The government reversed its policy in the end after just 92 days. It was historic. Now, while the fight is by no means over, it is quite accurate to say that the reversal was a massive victory for our community. But what a lot of people don't know is that this actually wasn't the first time our friends in the Liberal Party tried to do this. Back in 2005, there was an effort to end autism therapy for kids over the age of 6. It took years that time to get them to reverse it, with a combination of political, legal, and individual advocacy. But in the end, it happened. Now, it's been said that you should never underestimate the power of a small, dedicated group of citizens to change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. The autism community, I think, really embodies that saying. Despite our challenges, despite our constant exhaustion, and the seemingly, at times, insurmountable obstacles that we face, we have held the government's feet to the fire and won. Twice. And we will continue the fight. But so far, most of our efforts have been focused on the fight for services for preschool children. And we're still working on that, don't get me wrong. But this year, we're also opening a new focus of attention on children and teens, those with ASD in the school system. As a mom of 2 children on the spectrum and as a teacher, you can imagine this is a subject that for me hits very close to home. Now, if you're a student with autism, the parent of someone on the spectrum, a teacher or an EA, or a parent of a child who has a classmate with autism, I don't need to tell you, the system is badly broken. The funding formula is in desperate need of change. There's a total lack of accountability and a lack of consistency for supports and services for ASD kids in the classroom. Now, over the last few months, the OAC has been consulting with a variety of individuals and groups to try to come to some sort of consensus about what we think are the solutions to the problems that we've already identified. We've come along other organizations that advocate for the disabled, like the AODA Alliance, the Alliance for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. We've also spoken with teachers' unions, those who represent education assistants, those who represent other disability groups. And we've also incorporated all 10 of the recommendations made by the Youth Advisory Group to the Provincial Advocate for Children and Youth, Irwin Ellman. That report, We Have Something to Say, which I discussed briefly with my first guest last week, we've taken all of their recommendations on education and adopted them into our report. So we held a protest back in November to let the Ministry of Education know that we mean business on this issue. We also publicly endorsed a call for the education accessibility standard. We've also held our first meeting with ministry level staff to open a dialogue. And we've also drafted a lengthy recommendations report that we hope to present to Education Minister Mitzi Hunter by the end of the next month. There's much more to come. Now, if you're interested in getting involved, then please join us on our Facebook group, the Ontario Autism Coalition, and ask one of the admins of our group to add you into our Education Advisory Committee. I'm going to be opening a dialogue with our members in there that are focused on this issue and asking for their feedback as we move forward. So, That's all the time I'm going to spend today on OAC talk. It's time next to talk about advocacy. So I'll be back after the break to give my first sort of mini lesson on advocacy. We're going to talk about writing effective letters. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Having my grandkids over is the highlight of my day. But it isn't all hugs and cookies. I also get to help raise them and teach good habits. I call it Grandma's Training Program. Whether it's safety in the backyard, no, or staying clean, don't forget to use soap, or monitoring video game use. And I don't just mean limiting the amount they play. We all spend more and more time on these little devices, and it can be really bad on our spine. Not long ago, I had neck surgery, and it was during my physical therapy that another patient introduced me to the ab collar. I used the ab collar during my recovery to remind me to have good posture during my daily exercises. And now it's an important part of Grandma's Training Program. The ab collar is lightweight, portable, and easy to put on. But best of all, it serves as a great training tool to teach the boys how they're supposed to sit while playing their video games. And now I hardly ever have to remind them at all. I want to help my grandsons grow up healthy and strong and make good decisions. And the ab collar is helping me do that.
Hi, welcome back to Autism in Action. I'm your host, Laura Kirby McIntosh, and today we're going to start our focus on advocacy with a basic introductory lesson on a skill that all of us as advocates need to use at some point or another. You've all been there. Something happens in your community or something happens to you personally or to your child and you're really angry. Now, you know it's not a good idea to pick up the phone, but it's time to write an angry letter. So today we're going to talk about how to write a letter specifically to somebody in a political position of power and how to do that effectively. Now, why am I some kind of expert on this topic? Well, one of my first summer jobs was as a correspondent for a federal cabinet minister up in Ottawa. It was my job to receive the mail that came to the minister's office and to respond to it. So, you know, those of you that have written a letter to a politician, you know those silly form letters that you get back? Yeah, I used to write those. So I guess the first thing that I want to talk about is the difference between getting a letter answered by somebody in the bureaucracy and getting a letter answered by somebody in the minister's office. For many of you that are writing about autism advocacy issues, that's what you're aiming for. You want this letter not to get trapped in the bureaucracy and be responded to with a form letter. You want it to head all the way upstairs to the minister's office. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, for those of you following along at home on Facebook Live, you may want to jump over to the OAC website just now and go under the resource page. There's an activist toolkit there, and there's a link to the PowerPoint presentation that I'm actually going to go through right now. As we're live, we're not going to be able to show those on screen, but later on we will. But you can follow along if you want. Yes, this is a PowerPoint that I have sometimes used in my classroom, but I think it's really important to share it with activists and parents as well. So the first thing is targeting your letter. You want to make sure that you write to the appropriate level of government. In my civics class, I always joke with the kids that there's no point writing to Justin Trudeau to complain about the fact that your trash wasn't picked up. You want to make sure that you know which level of government is responsible for what you're talking about. Those of us in the autism community, I think we're pretty clear that we want to target the provincial level of government. And never, ever, under any circumstances, should you begin your letter with "to whom it may concern." You actually want to target a specific person. Sometimes you want to target multiple people. If you've got the time, it's really worth it to take 5 or 10 minutes to call the person's office in advance and make sure that you're clear about who you should send this letter to. Just call the office and say, I want to write a letter about such and such a topic. Who's the best person to send this letter to? And once you've got that actual name, you can find their email and target it. The last thing you want to do is have your letter get lost somewhere in the bureaucracy and spend 3 months sitting in someone's inbox not being responded to. Now, for local issues, obviously you're going to target your town or city council. On autism-related issues, you might be writing about recreation programs or parks. I remember one of the first advocacy letters I wrote was to my city councillor to ask if a fence could be put on a small park near our house, because it was fenced all the way around except for a gate. And my kid was a runner, and I was like, hey, can we have a gate? So I wrote my local councillor, and we got it. For provincial issues, this next tip is crucial. There's a service called InfoGo. Do a Google search on infogo.com or something like that. And it is a directory of everybody that works for the provincial government, from the ministers all the way down to the lowliest bureaucrats. What you want to do is specifically target people in the minister's office, particularly if you're writing about current issues facing children, youth, and adults with autism. Now, you might be writing the Minister of Children and Youth Services, you might be writing the Minister of Education, or you might be maybe the Ministry of Health or Community and Social Services. Those would be the big four that I expect that you'd be writing to. Now, there's also a similar service for the federal government. It's called GEDS, that's GEDS. And you can see on the PowerPoint slide, there's a picture there of what it looks like. So the same thing is true. You can scan, you can search, and sometimes it's a really good thing to look that up. Now, in the minister's office, you have a scheduling assistant. You probably don't want to write that person. You have a legislative assistant. They're responsible for everything that's going on in the legislature, obviously. You have a speechwriter. Usually the person that you want to write to is a policy assistant. The trick is knowing which policy assistant in the office has the file for autism issues. And that's why I say give a phone call ahead of time, because it's a really good idea to make sure you get the right name. And of course, you have to keep up with the news, because every time there's a cabinet shuffle, there's a change in the staff in the minister's office. That's one of the big differences between the minister's office and the bureaucracy. The minister's office staff, they're all political. They get that job because they're partisan. Right now, they are active members of the Liberal Party of Ontario. And because some of the decisions that they make in the minister's office are directly political and sometimes secret, the bureaucracy people may not know about those. So you want to target those people, but the tricky part is that they do change frequently. So the next thing is, of course, you need to format your page properly, and there's some notes in here about how to do that. I'm assuming most of you know, and of course, a lot of the time now these go in as email. I'd be curious to actually talk to somebody who handles correspondence to find out if there's any difference in the way that handwritten letters are received as opposed to email or a typed letter. I don't know, back in my day, but this was like the 90s. For some reason, I always felt like we had to take handwritten letters more seriously, but I'm not sure that that's true in 2017. Okay, let's get to the part where we begin your letter. Obviously, you want to start by identifying yourself. Tell them your name, your age, your city of residence. There's no point writing a letter and being all anonymous, like, I'm not going to reveal who I am. Well, okay, then they're not going to respond to you. And then right out of the gate, in the first paragraph of your letter, you want to state the purpose of the letter. What's the issue or problem? And try to get it into one sentence if you can. Now, if your issue is about a specific law or a bill or an agreement or a policy, make reference to it directly. And if you can, if there's a number attached to it or a name attached to it, cite that specifically. Next, you want to, in sort of the second paragraph, really explain why you're upset. And this is where you can be personal in the letter. Express your feelings. Now, you have to do so, though, in respectful language. Obviously, they're not going to listen to you if you're swearing or making wild accusations that the current minister is actually the reincarnation of Satan or something like that. That goes to a different pile, and you don't want to be in that pile. You want to be in the serious pile. So explain why this issue or cause is important to you, and if you have a personal connection, then talk about that briefly. Next, you want to give insights and reasons why you feel the way that you do about the issue. Your reasons really have to be convincing, because the person that you're writing to has probably already heard a lot about this topic and is familiar with the pros and cons. So you've got to go that extra bit further and talk to them about why you've got the perspective that you do. The next thing, and this I'm going to argue for our purposes in the advocacy community, this is the most important part. You need to show them that you're one step ahead of them, that you're not going to accept that form letter that I was trained back in the day to send out. You have to customize the letter and let them know, look, I already know about the funding announcement that came out in April, and I already know about the reversal of the policy, and I already know this. And what you're doing with that is that you're sort of pushing away the form letters that they might have been thinking about sending to you. And you can even say explicitly, and I've done this a few times, don't brush me off with a form letter. My question for you here is very specific, and it is this. And when you do that, when you show them that you know how the system works, it's more likely that your letter is going to leave the bureaucracy and actually head upstairs to the minister's office. And that's what you want. The next point, and we've been told this many times in the OAC, especially when we've met face-to-face with politicians, you have to do more than complain. Don't get me wrong, we have a ton of things to complain about in this community. The services and supports for people with autism in this province are woefully inadequate. But at some point you have to get past the complaint and get to a solution. What do you want to see instead? And what would that look like? What would it cost? What would the government have to do to actually make it happen? Now, I'll argue here, as I have several other places, that often really the only thing that's missing is political will. The minute the government decides something is a priority, oh boy, stuff can get done fast. But you have to talk to them realistically about how current programs could change. What do you want them to do? Do you want them to pass a law? Do you want them to change an existing law? Do you want them to increase or decrease funding? Do you want them to get rid of a program that isn't working? Be as specific as you can about what needs to change and what would make your situation better. Now, the way that you end the letter is just as important as the way that you started. You do need to thank the official for taking the time to read your letter and let them know that you're looking forward to hearing from them at their earliest convenience. Sometimes you can even push the envelope a little bit and say, I really need to hear an answer by such and such a date. And that really puts some pressure on them to follow up. You're going to end with something respectful, yours truly or sincerely, and then sign the letter if you're doing it by hand. Now, here's a fun fact for those of you that might want to write to the federal government. And those of you that are interested in things like a national autism policy, for instance, you might want to write to your federal politicians or the federal minister of health. Did you know that when you write to an MP or a cabinet minister or to the prime minister, it's the one time in your life that you get to put a letter into the mailbox and you don't have to put a stamp on it? Because the federal government regulates Canada Post, and because it's considered your democratic right to speak to your official, you don't have to put a stamp on that letter. Now, unfortunately, this is only true of the federal government. They, I guess, maybe don't want you to correspond as much with the provincial and the municipal government. But should you ever have reason to write to somebody in the federal government, remember this fact about the postage, because it doesn't matter how big the package is. So if you wanted to send, this desk, technically you could. There have been groups that have been really creative about this. There was a group that sent a series of crushed pop cans to the Ministry of the Environment to promote national leadership on recycling. You can have a lot of fun with this one. Anyways, sadly, it doesn't apply to the provincial government. Oh well. Now, I want to break a hard truth to some of you. There's a thing called an auto pen, and I remember when I was working for my federal minister, being led into the minister's office and given the tour and being all impressed and stuff. But my world kind of shattered when they said, okay, so once you've done your letter and you've responded to the constituent and your boss has approved it, you're going to bring it over here. Silly me, I thought the minister had to sign it personally. But then I looked at the volume of letters that go into the minister's office on a daily basis, and this is back in the day. Back then, it was like 400 or 500. And my boss politely explained to me that it's not physically possible for the cabinet minister to sign that many letters a day. They would never leave their office. So they do have a machine, and there's a link in the PowerPoint to a video of this if you want to see it, called an auto pen. And yeah, it's exactly what you think it is. You take your little sheet and you put it down and you press a button, and the machine at some point has learned the signature of your cabinet minister, and the pen comes down and signs it. The first time I saw this, I was like, wait a minute, isn't that fraud? Is this legal? Is it okay? Of course, it's perfectly legal. So a lot of my friends that have worked for cabinet ministers delight in being able to tell the difference between the auto pen signature and the real signature, and they do funny things like they hold it up to the light. This became a lot of fun when Bruce and I got married, and a number of our friends who worked for different politicians signed our wedding registry as those politicians. So we've got all these fake signatures of like previous prime ministers and stuff in our wedding book. It's kind of funny. Anyway, so let's review. We talked today about targeting your letter, formatting it properly, explaining what you're upset about while remaining respectful, as hard as that is sometimes to do. We talked about the biggest idea today, which was show them that you're one step ahead of them and that you've done your research and you already know the basic level stuff. We also said it's important to do more than complain, to actually make suggestions and recommend certain actions, and then of course to end your letter respectfully. So there you have it. That's my basic lesson on how to write an effective letter. Stay tuned later this year when we might be asking you to say, write a few letters to some school boards or to the Minister of Education. So hopefully these tips will be of some assistance to you at that time. So we're going to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, I have just a few short announcements for you, so please don't go away. We'll be right back. Thanks.
Life has a way of throwing you curveballs. Sometimes you're lucky enough to see it coming. Other times it just hauls off and hits you in the face without warning. When my second child was born and turned out to be special needs, that was a curveball that neither my first wife nor I saw coming. However, it's not the fact that life saw fit to hit us with this challenge that matters. It's the daily struggle to adapt and overcome that makes us who we are. Being both a blended family and one with a special needs child definitely makes some days a real challenge to navigate successfully. It takes a full measure of teamwork from everyone involved to make the family work. Most days, we don't have it all together, but together, we have it all.
Welcome back to Autism in Action. We're coming to you live today from the heart of downtown Toronto. I'm your host, Kirby McIntosh, and I want to take some time today to highlight the amazing work of the folks here at the Disability Channel and thank them again publicly for the opportunity to host this show. The Disability Channel has actually been around for quite a while, over 30 years, and I really want to encourage you to visit their YouTube channel and take a look at some of the amazing videos that are already there. Those of you that are actively involved in the Ontario Autism Coalition will recognize actually some videos that were made about our events earlier this year during the Autism Doesn't End at 5 campaign. They also covered our education protest recently this past November, and there's a video about that. But more importantly, I think as activists and advocates, it's really important for us to know that the issues that affect us in the autism community also affect other people with other disabilities. And I guess I want to take a second here to talk about a word that's really, really important to me: intersectionality. Now, when I first throw this word out in my classroom, I get a lot of students sort of rolling their eyes and going, wow, that's a really big issue. I don't think it's hard to understand, though. Intersectionality is when you have two different things colliding, intersecting. And so you may have somebody who identifies as a person on the autism spectrum. They're also female. They're also a member of a racialized community. Maybe they also identify as LGBTQ. And so when in the advocacy community we shine a spotlight on only one of those things, we're really kind of ignoring the whole person. So I think as we grow as an organization and as advocates, it's important for us to consider some of the other things that are true of the individuals with autism in front of us. They're not just an autistic person, they're a whole person, and they've got other stuff going on. And we need to take those things into consideration as well. So the Disability Channel does great work advocating for people of all different types of abilities. They really pride themselves on being an organization by and for persons with disabilities, and they showcase abilities. And some of the videos that I've watched have been really remarkable, showing some of the fantastic everyday stuff that people with disabilities are doing. You can check them out on thedisabilitychannel.ca. You can also find their Facebook group. They've got a Twitter handle. You can follow that at TD Channel. They've got a LinkedIn account, a YouTube account, as I mentioned earlier, and they've also recently partnered with Roku TV and Comcast in the United States, and they're really growing their audience. Now, we talked about letter writing today, so you know what? I'm going to wing it a little bit here and see if I can get a letter writing campaign going. It is absolutely appalling to me that we have on our cable networks, we have a fireplace channel, we have an aquarium channel, we even have a Swiss Chalet rotisserie chicken channel, but we don't yet have a disability channel. What's up with that? So I think maybe some people might want to take the skills that we learned today on the show and apply them by writing the Minister of Communications who oversees the CRTC, and to say, hey, we know you've got an application, there's an application in from the Disability Channel to be added to the regular cable package. We want a disability channel to be part of mainstream television in Canada. It's long overdue. 1 in 6 people in this country identify as somebody with a disability. So let's get some letters going to see if we can lend our support to the Disability Channel and help them as they grow and expand. They're doing great work. Please take some time today to share this video if you liked it, to tell your friends about the Disability Channel, to tell them about the Ontario Autism Coalition. Spread the word. That's really how we make things grow and how we make things happen. I guess the last thing I'll do today is just tell you a quick anecdote or story about something that really helped me learn about disability. When I was a young teacher and before I had kids, I was perhaps that teacher that thought, oh, I'm never going to teach people with disabilities in my classroom. All of my classes are going to be neurotypical kids, kids who are able-bodied, and special ed is never really something that I'm going to have to deal with. And I think I'm probably guilty of being that teacher that may have said some unkind things about how intense special needs moms are. And now I are one. So I've made a journey from one side of the desk as a teacher to the other as a parent, and that's a really interesting space to navigate. I think sometimes what people in the school system need to know is that we spend so much time fighting as autism parents that somehow along the way we lose the knowledge that we don't need to all of the time. And the first time this really became clear to me was when my son was about 5 years old and he was attending a public daycare. And I noticed one by one, all of the other kids in his class were being moved up to the preschool room, and he wasn't. Well, the thing is, once you've experienced discrimination, you see it everywhere. And I smelt discrimination. So I got ready, and I got the phone number of the director of that daycare, and I called her up, and I was ready for a fight. My blood was boiling. I was like, I want to know why my son hasn't been moved up to the preschool room and all the other kids in this class have been. And I braced myself for the answer, and the director said to me, well, Mrs. McIntosh, it's really quite simple. We move them up when it's their birthday, and your son hasn't had his birthday yet. And I had to sort of rewind and go, oh, right, okay, that was it. So I guess my advocacy tip for the day is we're going to fight a lot of battles, folks. We have to pick and choose the hills that we want to die on. And sometimes what you think is the fight of your life is actually something that's really got a very simple explanation. Anyway, that's all the time that we have for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you'll tune into our next one. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks to everybody, the whole team here at TDC. And I'm signing off. I'm Laura, your Autism in Action host. This is a new title for me. It's kind of cool. I guess I have to get used to saying, see you next time. Thanks so much for watching.